Hello, Garland Nixon here. And today we're going to talk about the unthinkable. You notice I got a smile on my face because why not smile? Today we're going to talk about the threat of nuclear confrontation. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. And, I think that's something, I don't know why. I mean, it's something that needs to be talked about. It should be discussed. Everything should be discussed. But I guess people are just freaked out and afraid. I mean, who wants to talk about nuclear confrontation and the end of humankind and all that kind of stuff? But, we're going to talk about it. And look, I imagine that this video won't get a lot of likes and watches because people don't like to talk about that kind of stuff. Here's the bottom line. One of the reasons that it's so easy to manipulate humans is just a fear of death, a fear of the unknown, a fear of going to sleep and never waking up. Or, of course, if you're a religious person, of going to hell or coming back as a worm or whatever the hell your particular religion takes you or doesn't. But it's that fear of death, right? And a lot of times it's irrational. When it comes to nuclear war, it's not irrational. So let's start here. Let's start philosophically, and we'll work our way up from there. Okay. Bottom line on this. Bottom line. At some point, all humans are gone. At some point, humans are gone. I mean, if you believe in any particular religion, take it in that direction as as you please. But the reality is, what do we know? That according to science, as we understand it, true or false, as we understand it, at some point, the sun swells up, sucks up the earth, it gets fried, and then the rest doesn't matter anymore, right? Human beings weren't here, now they're here. And so the only question is, when? I mean, I'm sure if the sun starts swelling and at some point this place becomes inhospitable, and of course, at any given time, physically things can happen, right? Right now, some star could have supernovaed, and there could be a bunch of gamma rays racing towards Earth right now to rip off our whole, atmosphere, and we could go. So at any time, now you can go that route, or you can simply say, I could snip on a banana peel. You wouldn't believe if I started telling you about the car accidents. We don't have enough time to tell you about the car accidents that I've been in that I shouldn't even be here. Death, one after the other, right? So the bottom line is this: as a human being, we spend every second of our life from the day that you're born at death's door. So the fear, I think, of nuclear war is that we all die. We all know we're going to die, but it's a fear that we're all going to die. There is an individual fear of death, right? I don't want to die, and it's the kind of this natural, in the same way that human beings want to procreate and maintain the species, and there's also a fear that the species is going to disappear. And I think that's some kind of a genetic code in there that species have, that they want to stick around. Why, I don't know, but it kind of works. This is what this universe produces. Who am I to question it? So if we get to nuclear war, from the second that nuclear weapons were invented, from the second they were invented, there was a trajectory towards confrontation, towards the potential or possible use of them. Once they were there, it was possible they were going to be used. And what we see now is a glaring and obvious conflict that would cause us to be stressed out, that would cause us to have a fear of the use of nuclear weapons, and we're all going to die. But keep in mind something. As we look back historically, we've come far closer than we are now repeatedly. The U.S. had nuclear weapons, and some countries that didn't. Immediately at the end of World War II, look up Operation Unthinkable. My understanding, I think Churchill might have proposed it, but immediately at the end of World War II, there were proposals to continue the, look, if you wonder why the Nazis are so integrated in NATO, so integrated in the West, well, at the end of World War II, as the Nazi machine was being integrated into the European and American international security and military complex, look up Operation Paperclip for one, and plenty of other books on that. As that was going on, there was a proposal, one might call it that, to attack, to basically to say, okay, let's finish what Hitler started, and we'll go in there, we'll attack the Soviet Union, and we'll use nuclear weapons to take them out. And that was, I guess, it was thwarted maybe by, I don't know that as well as I should, but it was thwarted. There we go. Someone has Operation Unthinkable was the name given to two related possible future war plans developed by the British Chiefs of Staff Committee against the USSR. Exactly. They wanted, they're like, well, let's finish what Hitler started, and we'll use nukes since we got them and the Russians don't, and we'll take out the Russians once and for all. And so then, of course, there was the threat in the Korean War to use nukes against China. There was the threats in the Vietnam War, and there was discussion of using nukes in Vietnam. On and on and on. There was the infamous in the early '60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we came really close, where there was a Russian sub that was being under attack, and they had to take a vote as to whether or not to fire their nuclear weapons because they thought a war had already started. They were pretty sure a war had already started, and there was like one guy who like turned the tide. Otherwise, boom, a lot of us would have never been born. A lot of people here would have never even been born, right? Of course, you've got the infamous 1983 instance where there were some Russians that were watching apparently radar, and they saw something on the radar. They thought it was incoming missiles, and they had to make a decision whether or not to respond. And that was almost the end of humankind. So the bottom line is this. It is apparent now that there's a conflict between nuclear countries, but time and again, little did we know, as in the same way that when you get in your car and you drive, you don't know that some idiot's not going to cross the center line and kill you. Every single day of your life, when you walk outside, that you don't know that you're not going to trip and fall off the stairs and break your neck and die. That same potential for the death of humankind exists every second. As long as there's nuclear weapons there, it exists. But as I said, you can get freaked out about that, but you can just as easily get freaked out about the fact that the potential for you to die you look, as long as you're alive, there's a potential for you to die. I've known people. I was playing on a basketball court one day with a friend of mine that I'd known for years. We used to play on Sunday mornings. We were like, 40-some-year-old guys, a lot of us, and some in better shape than others. And a guy, we're running down the court and look, and there's a guy laying on the court, and we're like, hey man, what's going on? Stop playing. We thought he was goofing off. The guy had dropped dead of a heart attack. So bottom line is, on any given Sunday morning, any of us can go to the gym or go for a walk or whatever the case may be. Somebody I know of that died, there was somebody driving down the road, dropped a cigarette in their lap, fumbling with it, veered off the road, killed somebody, on and on and on, right? So that potential exists for the individual. But again, as I said, there could be something, about to slam into our planet at, darn near light speed. Anything could happen. The potential for death is there. But this particular thing freaks us out. And maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. Now, if we talk about the current instance, let's start the current iteration of this nuclear potential confrontation. Something I want to touch base on for starters, because this is what I hear from people. There is a fear. There's a fear and a concern, and this is the concern, and I think it has to do not so much with the potential of people dying. I think people are like, yeah, okay, if there's a nuclear war, I'll croak, certainly. But it's unfair because they'll get away with it. The Tony Blinkens of the world and these people, they're going to get away with it because they've got bunkers. That's the first thing you hear, right? Well, they got nuclear bunkers. They'll survive. Well, let's talk about that for 1 second. I think it's important to take that apart, because a lot of times when people say things in the kind of, in our imagination, in a broad sense, it seems to be realistic. But when you narrow it down, it's not what it appears to be. Let's start with this, the idea of bunkers. So let's say, for instance, that they got a bunkers for Congress, they got bunkers for the leaders of the government, and that if there's a nuclear war, boom, they go to the bunkers, right? And they're going to, at that point, they're going to be at the bunkers and they're going to make it. And we all get to croak, but they get to the bunkers. So somehow they won. Let's start with that. Let's just say, for instance, there were a nuclear war and these people got to get to the bunkers. The bunkers are somewhere. Let's say they're in the mountains of wherever, right? On any given day, there's not going to be a lot of, let's say there were a nuclear war. You would need a significant amount of time to get to the bunkers, right? Let's just say some members of Congress are at home, some are in Washington, some are here, some are there, whatever the case may be, right? And nuclear weapons are fired. Of course, DC would probably get hit first. What would you have, 20, 30 minutes if they're fired from missiles offshore? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you got an hour. You got 1 hour. Hey, the missiles are going to hit in 1 hour. If you ain't in the bunkers by 1 hour, you're done, right? What are the odds, if you're any given member of Congress, that you're going to be within 1 hour of the bunkers, wherever you are, that you can get to a plane, and this plane, a military transport, can get you to whatever these bunkers are? Not real good. Not real good. I would say not good. You're Tony Blinken, right? Okay, he may happen to be in China. They're traveling. Blinken, Biden, all of these people are traveling at any given time. They're all over the world. What are the odds that they're going to be within 1 hour, let's just say an hour, is how much time they've got, of a bunker? Not real good. So the odds, even then, if you talk about them getting to their bunkers, the percentage of members of Congress, the percentage of these governmental people, government leaders that can get to the bunker, is going to be minuscule before this happens. A lot of them will be gone with us in the lucky ones would be gone with us in the immediacy of the first blast. Not many of them are going to be close enough to get to the bunker in time, but let's just say some of them get to the bunkers, right? Okay. Now let's get there, right? Because people are like, darn it, that's not fair. They get to the bunkers and they survive. But what does that mean? Right? We're just talking about the bunkers now. We got plenty others to talk about. What does it mean to get into a bunker? Okay, now you're Tony Blinken. You get to the bunker. You get in. They close down the bunker. The bunker's shaking. Boom! Things are blowing up all over the world. You're getting things. Paris is gone. Blah, blah, all these. Oh my gosh, there's nuclear soot in the atmosphere everywhere. All the information's coming in. Oh, all of our satellites are down now, so we can't get any information whatsoever, because everything that would send the satellites down, we got no. So now we're in a bunker. There's radiation out everywhere. All of any communication systems, satellite systems, all of that stuff is down. So you're now in a bunker and you don't have a way to know what's going on outside. Okay, so let's just say, for the sake of argument, Blinken, Biden, Newland, all these people, they're in their bunker, big old bunker, right? Underground, and they're nuclear free. And they're like, okay, we're in. Doors closed. All right, what's the plan? Let's have a meeting. And they have a meeting. All right, we've got to have a strategy. Let's see what we got here. And some guy, General, Smithers, walks in. He says, what do we got, General Smithers? Okay, let's lay it on the line. Let's decide what our next course of action is. From the looks of things, nuclear weapons have hit everywhere. Right. We fired ours. Russia fired theirs. China. Everybody's fired their nukes. Okay. The entire world, within days, maybe within a week, will be circled by ash from nuclear destruction, and everything will get cold, and we'll have nuclear winter. Everybody's going to die. Great. We got that information. All right. Now what next? Yeah, that's pretty much it. No, but I mean, what do we do? How do we deal with Russia, China, our adversaries? What is our strategic move? What are their... And old General Smithers is like, I don't quite think you grasp what's going on here. Ain't no Russia. There ain't no China. There ain't no America. There ain't nothing. There are you friggin' idiots in this bunker with me. And there's no strategy. There's nothing to strategize. We're in a bunker. I'm sure there's some other bunkers around, maybe some rich people, maybe some whoever could get in the bunker. We can't communicate with them because all satellites have been destroyed. All communication systems on the ground have been destroyed. And if we do find a way to communicate with them, all we can do is communicate and say, hey guys, what's happening? Nothing. What's going on? Yeah, we're living off powdered eggs and powdered milk, water. We got an air filtration system here, and we're kind of looking at 4 walls. Okay, great. What next? That's pretty much it. There ain't no next. We're in the bunker. And here's the thing about it. At that point, at some point, it dawns on them. They won, but they lost. Personally, if it were Garland Nixon, and you said, okay, here's your plan, Garland, you got 2 options. There's going to be a blast. You can go right to downtown DC and it's all over. Or these last few years you got left, you can spend in a bunker with Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and maybe a few billionaires. I don't know, George Soros, the Koch brothers, whoever the hell billionaires can have bought their way into the bunkers. You can spend your last few years with these people. And what happens if one of those people brought an illness, a disease? Some of those people brought something in there, right? What do they have? A couple doctors, maybe a little bit of an operating room. To what end? To what end? What does it keep you alive for? What is your plan? You're no longer the head of the State Department. There ain't no state. There is no department. There's no nothing. You have been reduced to amoeba. You have been reduced to the most basic of a life form. You are in a bunker with a bunch of people with nothing to do but survive. You got room, any government bunker, they got meeting rooms. All right, let's all go to the meeting rooms. You got whiteboards, you got things like that. All right, we got a whiteboard. Somebody give me something to put on a whiteboard. Number 1. And somebody would be, hey, okay, in the back of the room. Could we maybe talk about what we're going to have for dinner tonight? Same thing we had for dinner last night, powdered food. And our urine will go through the filtration system. It will be cleaned and we'll drink it again. That's pretty much it. Reconstituted urine and powdered food. Next question. Yes. Can I see the menu for breakfast? Reconstituted urine. We do have some powdered eggs. And I think some guy snuck in a dozen eggs. We're trying to find out who and where, and maybe what we can do with those. But I think we got some reconstituted pie or something. I think you add water or something, it gets microwaved. And of course, we don't really have to microwave it. We can just stick it outside for a couple minutes and it'll cook fine. But that's the plan. Next, and that's it. That's it. That is your life. You won. You made it to the bunker. And in the bunker is reconstituted urine. That's what you get. Your urine goes through a filter and you get to drink the same urine over and over and over. That's reality. Is that winning? So the idea that somehow Victoria Nuland and the billionaires who make it to the bunker win, if that's winning, I'll hug the first nuke. If that's, put an X on the ground. I don't live far from Washington, D.C., right? Put an X on the ground. And as soon as like phones, hey, what's this strange sound that the phone's making? Holy crap. It says nukes inbound. You got 20 minutes. I'm heading for D.C. I want an X right in the middle, right next to the White House in Lafayette Park. Put an X there. I'm getting as close as I can to that X. I need flash a light. Don't want to see it. Because the question becomes, do you have a fear of death? Doesn't it? It becomes, do you have a fear of death? We're all out of here at some point. I don't have a fear of death. I'm alive. Studying Zen helps, but I'm alive. There is no future. There is no past. There is the eternal now. Everything in the universe happens now. There's no depression or anxiety in the now. Depression or anxiety is like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Or are we all going to die? Oh, why did that happen to me in the past? How horrible it is. Let me ruminate over how I was mistreated or abused as a child. That's where depression and anxiety is, in the future and the past. In the eternal now, you just sit there and look around and like, Man, that's an interesting dragonfly going by. Well, look at that. There's a bug on the rug. I better get that. You just look around. The eternal now is pretty cool. But fear of death in the future, a rumination about horrible things that happened in the past, you got a lot of stress. But in the now, ain't no nukes hitting right now. Nothing's happening right now, but now. And when you recognize that we've been through this, you just didn't know it. We've been close to nuclear annihilation time and again. And the other various ways that you could have died, there's people here that have had operations that could have died on the operation. All these kind of things that could happen. When you come to grips with that, life just is what it is. And you're here until you're gone. But right now is pretty cool. Right now is a lot of fun. And as long as you stay in the now and enjoy the now, you have no worries. But who amongst us would want that life, the life in a bunker? I mean, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about the bunker because that's what I hear from people first. This feeling of it's unfair or somehow they'll still kill us all and they'll get out of it. Is that getting out of it? Is that? And then now think about this. You're in a bunker, right? All righty. So in a bunker, in the context of a bunker, there still has to be a hierarchy. So you're in this bunker and it's like, all right, we got servants, we got people who clean things, we got people who fix things. We've just thought of everything. We got mechanics. They're going to, if the air filtration system that goes down, if the system that, God forbid, filters our urine every day so that we can re-drink it. And when we flush the toilet, it filters that poop water that goes through the toilet and the urine and all that, filters it over and over and over so we can drink it, just like the astronauts, right? Over so we can drink the same thing over and over again. Well, you got mechanics, you got guards, you got security. You never know what they'll need them. So they got guys walking around with guns just in case somebody decides to try to break into their bunker and take their bunker. They got security, blah, 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 right? But these are human beings. They're thinking sentient beings. And then sometimes something's going to dawn on them. I'm in a bunker. And I'm a, let's just say, security guard. I'm a mechanic. I'm whatever, right? What is my motivation for doing this? I got a bunch of people down on the other floor. And here we are, the workers. We're the floor where the workers and the maintenance and all the area where the bunkers are, where the bedrooms are, where the people who work there and do things and fix things and all that, the lower class, right? You're going to have maids. You're going to have people to clean up, people to, okay? So you're in that area. At some point, somebody's going to kind of be like me. They're going to be kind of philosophically thinking, and they're going to ask questions. Hey, guys, I was just thinking, we're maids, we're this, we're that. Yeah. Why? Why? Why do we accept this hierarchy? But you see, they can't pay us because there ain't no banks. They can't give us any advantages. We have accepted a hierarchy. I'm going down there every day, wiping things down, cleaning things. They're snitting at us. Can you imagine how hard it is to work for Victoria Nuland and people like that? These people are assholes. You ever been around people like that? How they treat the help? So you walk down. Yes, Miss Newland, would you like water? Yes, I would like. Oh God, you people! This glass has spots on it. For God's sake, take this back right away. Oh, be gone with you. Be gone, peasant, and come back with the clean glasses. Right. So you're dealing with that every day. You learn to hate these people, day after day. Week after week, month after month. They're arrogant. And you know that everybody you know is dead and they did it. And they're treating you like crap every day. And after a while, it starts to dawn on you. Why am I a maid? Why am I a mechanic? Why do we even need these people? And at some point you have a meeting and you send a representative down who says, hey, billionaires and Blinken and you guys, do you have a minute? And they say, yeah, sure. Peasant, come down here. We've got a minute. We're having an important strategic meeting to talk about strategic things. We got a whiteboard and we're at number 1 and we've almost been 4 years and we've almost come up, real like 4 months. And we've almost come up with something number 1, somewhere to start on the whiteboard. We just got to figure out where to start. You're like, yeah, good move. So here's the thing, guys. We've had a meeting amongst the riffraff, the hoi polloi, the unwashed, you might call us, the mechanics and things like that. The billionaires would be like, would you hurry up? Can't you see we're almost to number one here on the whiteboard? We got things to do. We do not have time to talk to you low life scum. Be gone, be gone, be gone, be gone. And the guy's like, yeah, I get that. So here's where we are, guys. Yeah, we realize that we have the security people and we have guns. Yet you guys ain't got no guns. You don't have an army. You don't have anything but us. And in this, shall we say, very basic environment of survival, the people that kind of like have the guns and the most people, and like the kitchen workers have knives and things like that. If you really think about it, if you go back to like the time of fangs and claws, at that point, wouldn't they be the people in charge? If you can kind of grasp the direction I'm going with this conversation. And of course, the billionaires would be like, hurry up there, scumbag. And of course, the representative of the workers would say, okay, let's shorten this thing up. We've decided that we're in charge and you ain't. Simple as that. We've decided that since we got the guns, we got the most people, we got the weapons, we got everything. We got access to food. Don't forget, we bring you your food. And we've decided that we're in charge, that there's a new sheriff in town and it's us. And since I was the leader on this whole discussion, I'm in charge now and you ain't. The first thing that means is these nice little places that you have to stay and all, yeah, that's over. You're going to stay where the maids used to stay. That's where you're staying. And we're going to move into the better stuff and eat the better food. And the reason you're going to stay where the maids and the workers and the maintenance and the sanitation workers used to stay is because you're going to be the maintenance and sanitation workers. Now, you may not want to do that. We've understand that. And if you don't want to do that, it's certainly your choice. You don't have to stay. We will open the door, we'll put you in the elevator, and out you can go into the nuclear wasteland. So you do have an option. We don't want to be unfair. You can stay here. You will be, it's truly a revolution. Remember, revolve. The bottom comes to the top comes to the bottom in a true revolution. Revolution is just the word revolve. So Blinken and Sullivan and all you people, you had a long time in your life. You went to the finest schools, you ate the finest food, you're used to having everything in your way. Well, you're going to be the maids, you're going to be the janitors, and you just have a choice. You can either do that or you go up there and die. I'm going to leave you guys to talk about this and discuss who wants to do what. And when we come back, just let us know. You got an hour. At the end of that hour, anyone who wants to be a maid, we got maid uniforms for you. We got cleaner uniforms for you. Anyone who doesn't will be put in an elevator and sent to the surface. Anyone who refuses to get in the elevator will be shot and their body will be put in the elevator and they'll go to the surface. That's what we've decided. Since obviously this isn't much of a democracy, you don't get a vote. In fact, you've already had your vote and you voted for this. And guess what? Everybody's dead. And the good thing about it is, from your perspective, is we had a vote about an hour ago because there are a lot of people that aren't really happy with you guys for killing everybody. My side won, so you're not going to get shot. I mean, that was kind of the vote. Do we just shoot them all, throw their bodies, and be done with them? Maybe we could freeze them. I mean, at some point, we run out of food. We eat them later. We started contemplating. We started doing some math and saying, how much food do we have to last for how long? And we counted you guys, and then we took that up. Then we took out the amount of food that you would be eating if we just got rid of your bodies. And so at that point, we felt like eating you wasn't really cool. And that's not where we want to be. And shooting you, well, that's an option that was actually quite attractive, believe it or not. We voted on that one for a while, but we decided, do we really want to do that? We'll just give you an opportunity to make a decision for yourself, live or die. You've already made a decision for everybody else to live or die. Now it's your turn. Toodles, I got a meeting to go to. Be back in an hour. Make your decision. And I'm telling you, I will guarantee you that if they got in a bunker, at some point, that would have to happen. That is the natural dynamics of humanity. At some point, they'd get their comeuppance, and they would be very fortunate if that conversation happened. I would suspect that it wouldn't be 4 to 6 months, it would be days, hours, weeks before that happened. I will guarantee you that is the natural dynamics of humanity, and that the likelihood, if I had to take wager, I would say they probably all just get shot. They probably just take them all, and they may torture them first or something. But at some point, I mean, think about it. You got people working in there, and they'd look downstairs on the little cameras, and they'd see Newland and Blinken walking around, and they'd say, "My wife and kids are all dead. Gee, I sure had a good time with Dad. He's dead. Hey, I had a crush on somebody else would be, I had a crush on that girl that worked up at the convenience store. She's dead. And everybody else is dead. Everybody's dead. And you sons of bitches right there are the ones that killed him." At some point, it would go really bad. And I mean bad. So I will guarantee you this. The Blinkens and all of those of the world who didn't make it to the bunker would be far better off than those who made it to the bunker in the long term. Because I don't know, they probably get tortured and murdered. They'd probably be beaten. They'd probably be turned into slaves, maybe raped as sex slaves, whatever. Their life would not be good if they had one after 4 months. So all I'm saying is this great fear that of it, you know what it is? It's the cosmic justice fear, right? People are like, well, even if we all die, them sons of bitches, it ain't fair. Why did they should survive? People, but isn't it interesting that human beings inherently want some kind of justice in the end, even if they don't survive? Well, I will guarantee you this. If they end up in a bunker with a bunch of people and they killed everybody, they'll get their justice. And those of us, the old saying about and the living shall envy the dead, their time will come. So all I can say is this: we'll start with the bunker. Let's dispel that rumor that somehow surviving in the bunker is going to be a good thing, and that's what you want. Forget that. Ixnay with the Unker Bay. No luck there. Now let's move forward. The idea of nuclear war just means the end of humankind a lot sooner than it would be, right? That that we have determined through technology to end humankind, rather than just wait around for our star to supernova or something. So it's a reality that's there. But as I said from the very beginning, that possibility always existed. And since that possibility always existed, as an accident, as some kind of a just happenstance. Oh, the early 1960s sub issue, the 1983 issue, something accidentally happened. Somebody seeing something on a radar screen and thinking it was an incoming missile. That thing always happened. But let's move to the dynamic that we are thinking about now. A conflict between nuclear superpowers or nuclear powers, period, right? Which was from the beginning, from the time that there became nuclear superpowers, there became not just a potential or even a likelihood, a reality that at some point there would be conflict between nuclear powers. And I don't mean military conflict. I mean some kind of a philosophical conflict that had the potential to lead to military conflict. Why? Because, as we know, historically, there have been empires, and empires have fallen, and empires always fall. There's in the universe, this is the way things work, right? A star is born, things come together, the gravity starts spinning, boom, 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 you got a star. And at some point, that star burns up all its helium. It converts helium to hydrogen. It burns up all its helium, gets out of fuel. That star at some point dies. There's death, human beings, animals, everything, born, dies. That's the way our universe works. So in reality, that's the way things go. And therefore, when a particular empire is born One could argue that the U.S. always had imperial machinations. Why? Because it's if your father was the emperor, you're born, and when the father dies, you become the emperor, right? Who's the father of the United States? The father and mother was England. It was an empire, the British Empire. So it was born as a child of the British Empire. So, of course, it was going to be an empire. And at some point, the British Empire died. One could argue after the Suez crisis, the British Empire died. At that point, the child grew up and the parent fell into the background. And now the parent is just a feeble, old, toothless, worn out, shadow of what it once was. And the child has grown up into a monster. So we got an empire, we got nukes. It was just a matter of time before an empire with nukes died. And so the question becomes, what happens when an empire dies that has nukes? That's all. That is it. When an empire, the US is an empire, Roman Empire, Ottoman Empire, on and on and on. It is the latest iteration of empire. And this empire is on the way out and it has nukes. And the question is, can the world survive an empire dying with nukes? Well, the answer is clearly yes, the world can survive anything. Will it? I think it will. I tend to believe it will. Could be wrong, but that's my opinion. So now what happens? The US now says, and if you look what's happening, simplify it. The Wolfowitz doctrine was the doctrine of, it was a different way to verbalize the Third Reich. The doctrine of the Third Reich. They were more knuckle dragging. There was no attempt to sound like an intellectual if you're Hitler and the Nazis, right? You don't say, we're going to do this in a nice way or kindness, or this is liberal interventionism. You simply say, the Aryans are the leaders of the world, and we are the superior beings, and therefore we have a right, and so we can go around with our military and smash anything in our way, and we will be in charge. That's the way you do it if you're the Nazis. If you're John Bolton and Blinken and these other people, and if you Paul Wolfowitz, you say, we have a right to rule the world. Our way of doing things is superior to all, and therefore we must continue to rule the world. And therefore, any country that begins to rise, we have a right, nay, I say a duty, to suppress those so that we can maintain power over the world. We've got to be the unipolar, right? The single pole of power in the world. We've got to be the hegemon, right? We got to be in charge. And if anybody else starts to rise, we have to put them down. And there we are now. It was inevitable. Russia and China started to rise. If you look, what is this Venezuela been about? As Venezuela started to rise with all the oil, the U.S. said, no, we got to stop that. So they went after Venezuela. Iran has great economic potential. We got to stop them. And they're independent. So countries like Venezuela and Iran with great economic potential who start to rise, the United States has to take them out. They just make up a bullshit excuse and say, we've got to sanction them because we're the good guys. But in reality, it's the Wolfowitz doctrine. We got to stop other potential challengers from rising. Now, what happens? Russia and China, they're on the move up. So now, instead of mid-level powers, instead of regional powers, you've got Russia and China that make a quick jump. Over like a 20-year period, they go from non-entities. Now, both of them did have nukes, to regional powers, now to world powers, at the same time that the U.S., which practices neoliberal capitalism, is experiencing the reality that neoliberal capitalism ultimately brings, which is they're contracting. The bottom line is Russia is in industrial and commodity power because, let me say this, because what we're looking at is countries that everybody was agricultural, right? And they go from agricultural to industrial. The US then migrated from industrial to financial. Everything's made off of complex financial tools. Russia and China both are doing, Russia's doing agricultural, it's doing industrial, it's doing commodity. It's a very mixed and I would say arguably a very healthy economy. China, industrial, some of the other stuff, healthy economy as long as it is connected to Russia. Russia and other countries that can supply that industrial economy with what it needs. They're very healthy. The United States is nothing but financialized, very unhealthy, and it's financialized with a bunch of swindlers and creeps. Everything is being extracted economically, financially from the bottom to the top. So it's in a death spiral. It's in an economic death spiral. So it's on its way down, falling apart. At the same time, the other countries are on its way up. So the U.S. is in a position now. So what we have now is really three superpowers. One of them was the unipolar, the single pole, and now the U.S. is trying to figure out how it can take the other two countries, which are still growing, getting more powerful. It's not like they've stopped or they've stagnated. They're growing and getting more powerful as the U.S. is exponentially is speeding its economic and therefore political and cultural demise. So this was inevitable. What we have now, from the day there were nukes, inevitably there was going to be an empire, because empires are part of the human existence, and inevitably one was going to be falling, and we were going to see where we got when that came. The other thing about empires is, they're sociopathic, they're narcissistic. The empire believes it has a right to control everything, and everybody else has to do what the empire says. So they're not friendly. So the question became, when the empire runs into other countries that are equal in power, if not greater than power, how does it respond? And the question is this: does the empire commit suicide? Does the empire say, I'm going to turn over the game? You know what I mean? The empire says, we're all playing a game and I'm winning. And you've seen like little kids that do this. I'm winning this game, this board game. And at some point, they look up and it's obvious they're going to lose the board game, and they just turn the whole board over and walk away. So the question is, does the empire, and this is a question for nuclear war, does the empire turn the board over and walk away? And in this particular instance, the U.S. empire has been reduced to a handful of people. The U.S. empire itself has been reduced to a very, very small group of people who are making the decisions. And within the context of that group, I think there are now that we're starting to see divisions. We're starting to see fights. It's obvious that somebody went to from the intelligence community went to Seymour Hersh, and they pointed out a particular group, the Newlands and the Sullivans and the Bidens and the Blinkens, and said, I don't like that group. I got a problem with them. So there's people that are letting information out on that group because they don't like them. They're unhappy with them. So that's where the thing to keep in mind is, even within the context of this group, there are those that are unhappy. And remember what I said in the context of the bunker, and that is, in that bunker there's fights. There's people that are going to be unhappy with the decisions that are being made by those who are in power, and feel that they should be in power instead, and things like that. And I think that's what's going on. One of the things that we don't see on the outside is that, I put it like this: the signals are there, but it's not clear, is that there is a nasty fight going on when inside the halls of power. And I think the three ways that it's being tugged is, hey, we're going after Russia when we should be going after China. So you've got the Russia versus China hawks. I think there's another group, that's saying we need to back down and we need to get our act together. And so within the empire, there's a fight, and that fight can greatly affect the issue of nuclear war. I remember during the lead up to the Iran war that didn't happen, right? After the Iraq war, there were the neocons wanted to go to Iran and fight Iran. And there was a battle. And I remember there was a general, I cannot remember his name. He died not too long ago. And he was in charge of the he was an admiral. He was in charge of all the military activities in the Middle East. And he literally said, we're not going to Iran on my watch. We're not going to go to a war and fight Iran on my watch. That's what he said. You're going to have to fire me. That did a couple of things. That let them know, this is a very powerful guy, and we're going to have to fire him and replace him if we want to go to war in Iran. But that also lets him know, if he said that, he's going to he's representing a military bloc in the Pentagon. So if we go to fire him and go to war with Iran, there's going to be some other people that don't want to do it, and we're going to now have some kind of an internal battle. And I think at some point, when you get to the point where you're pushing towards the nuclear confrontation like that, of that level of danger, we would literally see some kind of you would see some kind of an internal confrontation. There would be people that would say, I don't want to kill everybody. There would be people that were going to say, I'm going to stand up and fight against it. So there would be before you saw a nuclear confrontation, I think you'd see some kind of a fight first internal. And I think that's going on right now. And that's a big part of what happens on the inside, how that confrontation works. I do think that there's within the ruling elite, there's a growing concern. I mean, think about this. You're a billionaire. You go to the Maldives, you go to whatever iteration exists of Epstein Island now to chase after young girls or whatever the case may be, right? You're doing all of these things that a billionaire does. And you feel like, hey, this is great, man. I got mansions, I got yachts, I got 500-foot ships that I float around on. I got helicopters. Man, what a life I have. You know, I walk out into my mansion and look out over the mountains. This is a fantastic, right? You don't want to lose that in a nuclear war. Look at what's his name? We're starting to get some of the people that are getting cold feet. Trump's getting cold feet. He's very wealthy. Look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk is starting to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, he's been saying that for a while. I don't like this idea. Are we moving towards nuclear war? Well, if you're the richest man in the world, you ain't the richest man in the world anymore if it's nuclear war, because there is no such thing as rich. And the billionaires are, I guarantee you, within the circles of the billionaires, there are those who are saying, man, you know, we only know we're rich because they're poor people. That is unfortunate for us, that they want to get richer and richer, right? They want a bigger distance between themselves and the regulars or the poor or whoever, so that they can feel the richness. I feel powerful because there's people that aren't powerful. You got to have power over somebody. You got to be living better than somebody. And in that group, there are those who are scared to death. And Elon Musk is starting to talk. And as if we get closer, that call from those are going to get louder. And might I also add, the call from those who want to go to war with China. I'm seeing some pushback on that. And I would say right now, that is a tremendous, that's probably more of a threat for nuclear war, oddly enough, than nuclear war against Russia, because the European countries are, you know, from the very beginning have said, hey, there's a red line. We don't want to go to war with Russia. And they don't want to. Now, could they be dragged into it? Possibly. But they don't want to do it. And they've made it clear. And they know there's a lot of pushback, right? The U.S. is kind of on its own when it comes to China, because they don't want to go to China, but they ain't going to push it so hard. And China has made it clear. Whereas Russia's like, look, we're going to go out of our way to avoid this thing. We're going to go out of our way to avoid war with NATO, right? China's said, look, if you push us too far, we're going to kick you in the head. You know what I mean? We're gonna punch you right in the head. If you this is ours. If you come after Taiwan like you came after Ukraine, yeah, we ain't gonna sit around like the Russians forever, and we're not gonna slowly slide into this thing with an expeditionary force. And not only that, they don't have the option because they're not connected to Taiwan. They can't just go across the border with an expeditionary force and try. And they know, so they got to make a decision. So they're more likely simply to surround Taiwan. And they've said to the U.S., if you try anything. So they've made it clear. China's made it clear. If they decide to move on Taiwan, they will only do that if they feel they have no other choice, because the United States has pushed it too far, at which point it is maybe even probable, since the U.S. has made it clear. See, with Ukraine, the U.S. never said, well, if you attack Ukraine, we're going to fight. But the U.S. has said, we're going to defend Taiwan. And if somebody has already told you, look, if you do this, you're going to go to war with us, then you can't wait around. You got to punch first. So if China decides to make a move on Taiwan, the likelihood is they're going to unleash missiles on the U.S. first. They're going to probably say, look, we can't wait around. And that means we're going to hit the U.S. with everything we have as quick as we can, as hard as we can. Like I said, you're talking about the Asian way of doing things. You're thinking about martial arts, and martial arts is, you're thinking about self-defense. And self-defense is if you have somebody who says, I'm going to hurt you, you hit them as hard as you can, as much as you can, as many times as you can, as fast as you can, until they're laying on the ground, and you can walk away and do what you want to do. You don't push them. You don't brush against them and say, please. You try to annihilate them in any way, shape and form you can. So if the Chinese were to decide to move on Taiwan, I would suspect that every U.S. base in the region would just see missile after missile after missile, every ship, everything, that this would be a devastating attack on the U.S. in the region very, very quickly. The U.S. would, in my opinion, in the opinion of a lot, you're 7,000 miles from home. You're fighting a superpower on their border who has can you imagine if you're the Chinese right now, if you think you might have to go to war with the U.S., can you imagine with the industrial capacity, how many missiles they have prepared for such a thing? Wave after wave after wave after wave after wave after wave. Imagine that you're in a I don't know, a U.S. supercarrier off somewhere out there within range of China. They're going to fire a salvo of missiles, and now you got a salvo of missiles coming at you. Some of them hypersonic, supersonic, subsonic, right? And let's say you can survive the first, which you probably can't. You think there ain't another salvo coming? You think there ain't a dozen salvos and a dozen more coming after that? You ain't surviving. If you're in how many anti-aircraft, I would imagine with the industrial capacity that China has, they're going to kind of figure out how many anti-missile missiles that you have on your bases and say, we're going to fire more than you have. And at some point, you're going to run out of missiles before we had, because we can put 10,000 missiles on you and you can only store 1,000 on each base. So the reality is the U.S., if something happens in China, the U.S. is going to go quickly into the negative category, and they're going to have lost. And then at that point, they'd have to make a decision. Do we go nuclear? At that point, if they do, then that would be it. And I think that there are a lot of people that know that. And that's why at some point there are people saying pump the brakes. There are people saying we got to keep going. But there's something else here that I want to bring into the conversation, and that is the issue of time, something that I believe is going on right now that I think is of great consequence. The question is this: if the U.S. wants to conflict with China, when would it happen? Number one, they got to do something with this Russia thing, because it ain't working out well, and they're trapped there. They can't walk away from that, and they can't stay. Right. So I believe, oddly enough, that the Russia conflict, not oddly, the Russia conflict, could be weird, that the Russia conflict could save the world, in that if the greater potential for military, as Scott Ritter has said, if the greater potential for nuclear conflict comes from China, then the longer the thing goes on, as long as it's going on, it's not as likely to happen in China. It's not as likely that the U.S. is going to make its dramatic moves. If this thing were to end, it may not be good, because the real hawks might say, great, we got an end to it. Now let's move everything to China. Let's go 100% completely for China. As this drags out, they can't really do that. And the weapons that we have that would allow us to be hawkish towards China are being depleted. So it's really greatly weakening the U.S. military and weakening the U.S.'s military options against China. And it is making it obvious to the allies of the U.S. and particularly Taiwan how screwed up the U.S. is and how much of a problem it would be for the U.S. to move on China. And what would happen? Clearly we know that the Taiwanese right now, that they're moving away, the direction of the Taiwan government, from the looks of things in the next election, is going to be to move away. We can't say for sure, but the appearance is to move away from being Ukraine 2.0 in the Pacific. That's going to make it difficult. And difficult for the U.S. to get the confrontation they want against China. The longer this thing drags out, the more the Europeans suffer economically. We saw recently a poll where the AfD party in Germany is now on the move, and the Greens and the hawkish parties in Germany are on their way down. That's going to happen all the way across Europe. It's going to get more difficult for the US. It's already extremely difficult, but more and more difficult for it to bring its vassals together for its next stupid move. They're going to be hurting so bad. So they're going to be in such great pain that when the U.S. says, okay, it's time to move on China, they're going to be in such pain. If they wanted to, they're not going to be able to. Their countries are getting more and more unstable economically, politically, culturally, you name it. Things are going in the wrong direction. So the U.S. is not going to be able to muster a coalition, the NATO coalition, and say, we're taking the NATO coalition and we're moving it to China now that we've finished with Russia. Well, but they ain't going to get finished with Russia, so they're not going to be able to have a coalition to move. They know that they're trapped in Russia, and there are a lot that want out, but there ain't a way out, really. They're stuck in there. And so what are they going to say? Well, we're just going to pull up ship and we're just going to pull anchor and move away and just get a deal. They can't get a deal with Russia, because to get a deal is to lose. So they're mired in a way, in a really weird way. They're mired in this Russia thing. They can't get a deal with Russia because the U.S. empire could never, ever give up the things that Russia wants, because that would mean that they lost, which they have. They can't enter really the conflict, because to enter the conflict, after you disarm yourself, you give up all your missiles, you give up all your weapons, you weaken your military, and then you go fight Russia on Russia's border. They all know, as much as they're talking, they all know they're running out of stuff quickly. And they're getting to a point where they're not going to have the stuff that they need to supply Ukraine, much less go to another part of the world. In order to go against China, they're going to have to rebuild their military to go against China. And there's something else I think we need to think about. And this is important. When one of the things that's going on now and worldwide, right, we see that there are private military units, so-called, I don't know if they are or not, in the Middle East that are now able to strike U.S. bases. They've got various kinds of cruise missiles and drones and things like that are very high, technologically very advanced, but inexpensive and easy to get. We got people that have literally bought drones off of eBay, connected a bomb to it, and flew it into a U.S. base and blew it up. Right? You can buy them on DHgate and online, regular old drones that'll fly a couple 100 miles that can be programmed to go somewhere, put a charge on it, and it lands and kablooey. You a couple miles away and it goes in, boom, right? Technology is making it easier for the little guy to attack the big guy. And so look at Iran. They've got hypersonic missiles. They got all these ballistic missiles. They got more and more stuff. They're making it more and more difficult. Every day it gets harder for the U.S. and Israel to attack Iran because Iran's technology is increasing. Russia, look what they've got technologically. China, one of the things that I think we are quickly on the road to, as the U.S. won't educate its people. Our education system is designed, like everything else, to extract money from the kids for going to school. They come to school, they get out of school, and it's not designed to educate them. It's designed to make them believe the religion of neoliberalism, to make them believe the religion of neoconservatism, and come out stupid. So as we graduate less and less STEM and science people proficient in science and things like that, Russia and China graduate more and more and more of those. The technological gap between Russia and China and the U.S. is going to grow. So Russia has hypersonic missiles. Russia has advanced electronic warfare. Russia has advanced anti-aircraft systems that now have been shown that they seem to be better than ours. Now we got Patriot systems, and Russia's got Kinzhal missiles that are Patriot systems. In the instance that we go to war with Russia, those Patriot systems all across Europe, they're in an hour. The U.S. don't have the NATO wouldn't have any air defense in an hour. One Kinzhal missile on each one of them, and they're all gone. No Patriot systems there. So we see that Russia can take out that. Now, here's my point. I say all of that. I believe that Russia and China, but we have heard that they're working on some joint military projects. I think one of the things we're going to see is that Russia and China's technological prowess in military hardware in military technology at some point within the next 5 years is going to advance to a point that it negates any advantages the US has. What happens right now? Right now, what happens to all of those ships? If Russia and China decide to start firing hypersonic missiles with the power of missiles, period, even non-hypersonic, salvos of missiles at U.S. ships, man, the U.S. loses a lot of ships. Our Navy, our infamous Blue Water Navy, is going to take it hard. Kinzhal missile has what, 1,700 kilometers? And buddy, there ain't nothing that can stop one of those. You got, what do we got? 14 aircraft carriers, 14 Kinzhal missiles, and you ain't got 14 aircraft carriers working no more. 14 missiles. And 14 aircraft carriers are damaged so bad, if not sunk. What happens if they fire 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 per missile? I mean, per carrier, 10. You're going to tear those things to pieces and sink every one of them, right? So already the technological, what's going to happen when now a U.S. that's accustomed to having a complete and total advantage with aviation, it runs into the S-400s, S-300s, S-550s, and S-500s everywhere. And now you can't come within 300-400 miles of anything Russian or you're going down. So again, the issue is the technological advancement is getting to a point where I think at some point the U.S. is not going to be able to threaten these countries really much at all, because they'll have technology that can reach out and touch us anywhere. And the only option that the U.S. will have, the only option will be a suicide pill. Will be to destroy the U.S. empire by firing nukes against the other countries, and then they fire nukes back. And what happens when the technology gets to the point, if it ain't already there, that they can defend against nukes? I think that these things, because technology is happening so fast, I think these things will be a reality within the next 10 years, that the level of military technology will be to a point that conventional military ships and tanks and things of that nature ain't going to be no longer going to give you any advantage. And that the world will be so small that with missiles fired from subs or whatever the case may be, they'll be able to hit the homeland anytime they want, take out all of the stuff that you use, the U.S.'s technological advantages. If they aren't already gone, they're significantly diminished, will be to a point where the U.S. can't even threaten these other people. And they'll just be like looking at us like, yeah, you can threaten us all you want, but there's nothing you can do anymore. What happens when they start sharing? If Russia and China says, we're going to share this technology with Venezuela, we're going to share this technology with Cuba, we're going to share this technology with Iran. And what happens when this technology is no longer mechanical? What happens when it becomes, they can, on their computer, they can bring up your planes, they can bring up your missiles. Imagine if right now on my computer, I could bring up planes, I could bring up missiles, and I could see the US's planes and missiles. I could target them with electronic warfare, and I could shut them down. You see, right now, they can target these drones. Right now, a drone's coming in. The Russians have things where they can say, all right, shut these drones down. Boom, they target the drones and they can shut a lot of them down. They can't shut all of them down, but they can shut a lot of them down. They're able to the point where they can shut missiles down. We're at the leading edge of that technology, but clearly 5-10 years from now, they'll be able to do that on a much, now we may be able to too, sure, but a lot of countries will then be able to say, if you got planes in the air, if you got ships, if you got missiles in the air, we can target them with electronic technology, maybe from space, and shut them down. When we get to that point, you're just not going to be able to threaten people anymore. So here's my point. Here's what I think. Don't worry about the bunkers, because if we get to that point, no, I mean, when I say worry about the bunkers, that wouldn't affect us anyway. And if they get in the bunker, it ain't going to work out well for them. That's number one. Number two, this confrontation between nuclear powers was inevitable. Was it going to happen 6 months after nukes, where everybody had nukes, 6 years, 60 years, whenever? It was inevitable. But here's the last thing that I say. I believe we get through it. When we get through, I think the other side looks really good. You know, I think we are at a death and birth point for humanity, that we're getting to the point where it's the death of the military might being used to suppress everyone else. It's the death of the U.S. empire being able to go around the world and make the global South starve and say the Africans and the Latin Americans are hungry because they're genetically inferior to us, when the reality is they're hungry and poor because we're starving them, because we're stealing their stuff, because we're overthrowing their governments and putting in puppets. That right now what we're seeing is the formation of a new world order that looks good for everybody, that looks like Africa, Latin America, these countries that we've been saying are less, when I say we, I mean, the US empire, are lesser. The colonial powers, they've got powerful advocates in Russia and China. And I think we're at a point where it's the birth of a new world. They're going to have some level of technological and industrial advancement, and their lives will improve. And the US is going to have some decisions to make. We're trying to hold on to this crap, but at some point we ain't going to be able to. And I think this whole thing drags out 5 years. Let's say it drags out 5 years. The US is like, well, by 2030, China will be too powerful for us to, well, China and Russia are coming together. So China and Russia right now, as a dual entity, as a single entity, are too powerful for the U.S. to take on right now. And I think that entity is just going closer and closer and closer. And I think it's possible, quite possible, maybe even likely, that when Russia and China recognize the U.S. is ready to move, they don't have any reason to announce a military alliance, but it's there. And I think that if Russia and China get down to ground zero, if they get to the point where they say, okay, the U.S. has finally lost it and they're ready to move on Russia or China, I think Russia and China at that point may very well announce a military alliance. They've all but done it. Their ships that recently, Russian and Chinese strategic bombers were flying around Japan. Russia's been doing all kinds of stuff in the Pacific to let everybody know. They recently had a giant exercise in the Pacific with 60 ships. I think they're letting everybody know that, look, man, we're over here in the Pacific, and if things get dirty, we can act. Now, I had Andre, what's his name? Andre Martyanov on recently, and he mentioned that in the Pacific, the U.S. has a significant lead, as far as a significant advantage, as far as the subs that can do a lot of damage. But keep in mind something: they're not better than the Russian subs, right? So they have a significant advantage over China, but not over Russia. Russia, when it comes to military technology, Russia's leading things and leading a lot of stuff. But when it comes to, when you look at the Yasin class subs, etc., they don't have that advantage. So if the U.S. were to have to go against Russia and China, the fact of the matter is this: that advantage would dissipate because of the Russian submarine technology. And of course, again, the U.S. couldn't take Russia and China, couldn't do it. And so if the U.S. was like, okay, we're going to act on China, I think if the U.S., if NATO, whatever, gets ready to move on one of them, the other one will come in and they'll come together and they'll say, we're announcing a military alliance. You fight one, you fight us both. Is that what you want? You sure you want to do that? And the Pentagon, and I'm pretty sure the NATO countries would be like, we can't fight both of these countries. First of all, keep in mind something: the NATO countries of Europe don't want anything to do with a fight with China. They don't want anything to do with that because they know they turn into an impoverished hellhole. They're there now. You take China out of the picture, they don't even exist. They're eating each other. This is zombie land. So they don't want that. Russia and China also know that if NATO takes out one, it's coming for the other. China knows good and damn well. That's why they're the economic backstop for Russia, because they know that if NATO takes out Russia, they're next. So if it came down to it, where there was going to be a military confrontation, China would have no alternative but to join Russia and say, okay, you're fighting Russia, you're fighting us. And I believe very immediately they would have to put the threat out and say, look, if you attack them, we're in. If they got the certainly, they have a lot of technological abilities to snoop. And if they started seeing the things going up that said, all right, we're bringing the ships around, we're going to go to war with Russia, we're going to attack Russia, I think China would then say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're moving on Taiwan. We're going to surround Taiwan, and now we're going to try you. And we're going to say, okay, so you're all planning on moving on Russia. We're going to take Taiwan now. So are you going to plan to move on Russia? What are you going to do? Which direction you going? I'm not saying they take Taiwan, but I think they would move on Taiwan. They would surround it. They do a blockade and say the U.S. now, if you're going to launch an assault on Russia at the same time, you're going to fight over Taiwan. Is that what you want to do? Because at that point, you start the war with Russia and China at the same time. Do you have the cojones to do that? And they know that the U.S. ain't doing it. They wouldn't be able to do that. And that the NATO countries outside of the U.S., the vassals, would say, we can't do this. We're out. We're going to lose, which they'd lose either way. So again, I think that there are dynamics there, because the issue is this. What is the nuclear issue? What is the nuclear issue? If the U.S. gets in a hot war with Russia or China, the nuclear issue comes to the forefront, because if the U.S. takes a beating, or if somebody takes it, as we know, if two nuclear powers go to war, if one of them's losing, they're quite probable to fire a nuke against the winner, and then the winner returns fire, and that's that, right? So the question is, how do you prevent that battle? We have a proxy war. Now, there have been proxy war. This is not, keep in mind something, this ain't the first hot proxy war. Afghanistan, the Russians knew good and damn well during Afghanistan that there was CIA in there, that there was special ops in there. During the Afghanistan 1980s conflict, when if you remember, the U.S. was supplying Stingers, it was supplying all kind of stuff to the Afghans. So that was a hot war, where the Russians knew good and damn well that both the U.S. was supplying missiles, and that the U.S. had some small amounts of troops and CIA on the ground. So the idea that this is the first hot war, what were the Vietnamese flying? They were flying MiGs. What were they using? They were getting training. They were getting weapons. They were getting all kinds of things from Russia and China. They were using Russian stuff, Chinese stuff. So don't fool yourself into thinking that during the first part of the Cold War that this didn't happen, because it did happen. This is the newest iteration of it, and there was fears back then that this could have went bad. So don't think this never happened before. It didn't happen in Europe. That's the difference. So I think the longer this goes on, here's my point, I'll end with this. The longer that the operation goes on in Ukraine, a lot of people aren't going to agree with me on this, the less likely that this becomes a nuclear conflict, because I think China's the more likely of the nuclear conflict. The longer this goes on, a couple of things are going to happen. The more support, the erosion of support in the United States and in Europe for this conflict and any conflict are going to decrease. The political changes will happen wherever around the world. You're going to see where there are elections in Taiwan, in different places where there are elections, there will be results of the elections that will not benefit the U.S. I think that the weapons that the U.S. has, the military potential for the U.S. and NATO will continue to decrease as they continue to send stuff in there. The political power and potential and diplomatic ability of the U.S. to muster its allies and to get help from other countries around the world will decrease. The longer this thing goes on, the weaker the U.S. gets. And it's getting weaker, way weaker fast. Not to mention, let's not forget, the banks could crash at any time. They are on the fritz. They are in bad shape. And the U.S. is on the verge of recession. So when this recession gets more pronounced, it's already here. When the recession gets more pronounced in Europe, when the recession gets more pronounced in the U.S., it's going to be hard for the U.S. to be digging around in a recession as we go into 2024. They're going to be dealing with this recession, and the people are going to be screaming, screw Ukraine, screw these wars. You got to do something about my everyday life getting rougher. It's going to get harder to project power and to push against people, to push against the outside. As we get closer to 2024, there's another war going on inside, and that is the war between the deep state and the American people. The war between the deep state and democracy. As Trump goes on to run, as RFK Jr. goes on to run, as Cornel West goes on to run, who else might enter? All other things are going to happen. And the deep state is in horror, saying, oh my God, the shit that we've done we can't have it come out. And if one of these people gets in power and start digging around and see what we've been doing, what happens if RFK Jr. or anybody, what happens if Cornel West and Trump or whoever gets in power, whoever, and that person gets in power and says, I want to know what happened with Nord Stream. I'm the president. And they go to the military and they say, and they put somebody in power, Douglas McGregor, whoever, and they say, I want you to find out what happened with Nord Stream. And they start snooping around. Can the deep state afford for that to happen? I want to find out what we've actually been doing. Snoop around a little bit. And they actually have somebody that starts looking and they say, oh my God, really? Did we do this stuff under it? So the deep state cannot afford to have somebody come to power in the US who may ask some questions, any questions. So you've got a war that the deep state has to have against democracy and against American people at home to try to deal with this election coming on and to make sure some Biden-esque, Kamala Harris-esque person wins. That's going to be hell for them. At the same time, we're in recession and the voters are saying, I'll take one of these people, the hell with these same old people. They got problems. So there's going to be major problems here in the U.S. projecting power, trying to hold this thing, this neocon thing together. So my opinion is the longer Ukraine drags out, the more difficult it gets. They've got themselves in a tar pit. And as they say in Russia, you know, when a bird gets one leg in a tar pit, the whole body's in a tar pit, right? It's gone. It's just a matter of how soon the tar pit sucks you in. And Ukraine to me is a tar pit. And the Russians are really smart in a way, in that they're like, remember what I said at the beginning? I said, look, if I were the Russians, I wouldn't be in a rush, man. I wouldn't do these big out. I would never be in a rush. I'd hold on to this thing as long as I could. A lot of people may not agree with me. If I were in charge, remember what I said about Bakhmut? I said, you know what I'd do? I said, the road out, I'd never shut it down. I'd let the road out. I wouldn't let troops out. I'd shell them like hell if they were going out. If they were coming in, I'd let them come in. I wouldn't shell the road. That's a shell here and there just so they thought I was trying to stop them. But I'd be like, I'd have like a guy with an orange vest like they do on the tarmac with those two orange things. He's holding up right this way, guys. He does like this. He does like this and he does like this and he does like that. And then when troops were trying to leave the road to Bakhmut, hold on. This is a Roach Patel. Roaches come in, but they don't come out. My position was I'd have let them send troops to Bakhmut forever so I could kill as many of them as possible. Oh, what, you got some tanks and some anti-aircraft stuff? Right on into Bakhmut. Keep it on in. Right this way. You need any help? Hey, we got I would call it like a humanitarian corridor. And I'd say we got a humanitarian corridor for the Ukrainians going into Bakhmut. Keep sending stuff in and we'll keep blasting it. The road out, you ain't leaving, but you can keep sending stuff in. And that would be Ukraine for me. I'd say just keep sending this equipment so we can blast it, test what we got, get rid of this stuff. Hey, we need more Patriot missiles. You only sent 3 and we blasted all 3 of your Patriot systems. Send some more. Because the longer this lasts, they get to get rid of stuff. They get to demilitarize NATO. They get to get stronger and stronger. The world gets to look at it and say, geez, they're kicking NATO's ass. It benefits you. And as the U.S. empire gets weaker, as we get closer to their economic demise, their economic fall, politically things are moving in your direction. If you're the Russians, if I'm the Russians, no big arrow offensives. I just keep fighting along these lines. I will stay on these lines and the line will move a few kilometers this way and they'll take a couple towns. Oh, they've taken Krasny Liman. They've taken whatever the hell, right? I'd back up. If they look like they're attacking a town, what the hell? Give them the town. I'd back up your town. Then a couple months later, I'd take the town back. And a couple months later, I'd back up. They take the town again. Now, the people who are like pro-Russia would be like, oh my God, what are you doing? We lost another town. I'd be like, yeah, we lost another town. Yeah, get it back in a couple months. I'd wink. Don't worry about it. We lost a town. We'll get back a couple months. Couple months, I come back and take the town again. Couple months. Hey guys, what's going on? Well, the Ukrainians have an attack. We'll call them and tell them attack the town. We're getting out of here. The Ukrainians would attack. I'd back up. Hey, they took the town again. And then the Americans in like the UK, they'd have like in the newspapers, hey, we took another town. Yay, we got to keep fighting. We took a town. We got to keep fighting. And the Russians be like, yeah, darn it, they took another town. Let them take the town, then back I go. So the bottom line is that would be my move if I was them. And I think that they're dragged into this thing. They stay here and they get weaker economically, politically, you name it, they're going to get weaker and weaker. And it's going to be in the best interest of humankind, because the weaker the U.S. empire gets, the less likely they are to be in a military confrontation with China or anybody else, the less likely they are to continue to have military support. And of course, there we go, the less likely we are to be involved in a nuclear conflict. So that's about it. Hey, everybody, I've got to get out of here and get running. Here's what I'll tell you. If you can, it would be certainly appreciated if you're able to go to patreon.com, PayPal, or buy me a coffee and donate something to the channel. Got my Cash App information there. Of course, we got rockfin.com, and you can go there, become a member. Doesn't cost anything to be a member if you can afford it. You can be a subscriber on Rockfin. Rockfin is my alternative platform wherein you can, if I get thrown off YouTube, it's there. If you can afford to be a member of, to become a subscriber on Rockfin, appreciate it. If you can't, don't do it. It's $14.99 a month if you can afford it. And if you do sign up for a year, I think it's like 12 something a month, because they knock off a couple of months. If you can afford it, fine. If not, then just subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. To become a member, it doesn't cost anything. And if they throw me off YouTube, you know where to find me. How about that? Everybody press the like button, and follow me on all my social media. And if you can, make sure you share this stuff on all your social media. Thanks. Peace. I'm out.